All right, class, I just wanted to go over the assignment sheet for your final exam, which is an essay that you'll be turning in on the date of your final exam to turnitin.com. If you want to know what the date is for your final exam, you need to check the end of the syllabus, and also turnitin.com has the date as well. All right, so this has to be worth double a normal essay because it is longer and requires a lot of skills that we've amassed over the semester. And it is the final exam, so it has to count double as well. It absolutely cannot be late because I don't have any time between grading these things and reporting grades. So, I can't accept any late. That's one of the school's rules. So, you're going to have to do it on time. But as you can see, it is going to be a 1,200 to 1,250 word essay. It's really going to be like your normal essay. The works cited page is probably going to add another 150 essays, and then you have an extra body paragraph you have to write for this one, which I'll get into in 1 second. Okay, but this is an extension of your annotated bibliography. So all the research that you did for your annotated bibliography, you should have been thinking about what your argument is about food or the food industry. I've given you 4 topics. If you can't, if you don't have one you want to do on your own. But you need to make an argument for some type of change. You're trying to convince the reader for some kind of change in the food industry, whether we're talking about how the animals are treated, in like cattle or food lots, or you're talking about, changing the way Americans eat, or banning Roundup or glyphosates like number 3 there in Georgia, or whatever. I mean, you could get, creative with it. You could argue that, a grade in high school cafeteria should, change their food, and that maybe part of the school should be producing the food on the property itself. You could be arguing for like prison food changes and prisoners creating their own food and, growing their own food. You can do whatever you want, but it has to be about the food industry. Okay, so here are the things that has to be in this essay. You have to have an introduction with a thesis that tells the reader your main points of argument. All right, so let me break down the introduction for you. First thing you should do is to let your reader know that there is a problem in our food industry or a relationship with food and how it is relevant to them. Whether it affects their health or whatever, you got to let the reader know that it's important to them if you're going to persuade them of anything. Then after that, your intro, besides your thesis, it should have whatever other main points that are not directly in your thesis. So anything else you're going to talk about. And you may also want to put maybe some interesting information, a statistic in there, especially if it's, like about diabetes, how many people get it, whatever you want to do to hook your reader in. Then you need to move on to body paragraph 1, which should always be your strongest argument. And you should have several main points. Generally in this essay, you're going to be kind of following a pattern. And that pattern is, you're going to make a point that there's a problem and what you're suggesting we should do to fix it. Then you're going to back up your point with evidence that either proves that there is a problem or proves that your solution works. And that's, your quote from your research. And that can either be, a direct quote, or paraphrase. But you have to follow the rules for those things. If you do them, it has to be punctuated correctly. It has to be in MLA format. Okay. Now so you have to explain. You also need a sentence that explains how that quote is necessary, how it works, how it connects, how it proves your point. All right. So you may do that 2 or 3 times in a body paragraph. Okay. Keep in mind that you're writing this essay and the quotes are backing you up. Okay. Not the other way around. So only like 10 to 20% of this essay should show up on the similarity report as quoted material, okay? You're still writing the essay. It's not just a copy and paste job. All right, now don't forget to use transitional sentences to move on to your next body paragraph's idea for smooth flow. Okay, and body paragraph number 2 is usually used for, one of your main points of argument, but maybe one of your weaker points. Okay, and you follow the same pattern as body paragraph 1. Now, body paragraph 3 is a little bit different. It deals with your opposition, people who are going to be arguing against you. For example, for years people were saying, oh, no, we shouldn't ban Roundup and glyphosates and all this stuff because, they help us, produce more crops and all that stuff, and for less money, and then we find out how many people are, getting killed by the stuff with cancer. So you always got opposition out there, and you have to destroy their argument. You have to have an entire body paragraph to deal with your opposition, people who may disagree with the argument you're making. And in this paragraph, you need to state what your opponent's argument is, and you need to either argue against it or disprove it, debunk it, prove that it's not true, or if the argument, if your opponents have, a good point and some true stuff, then you need to talk about how their point is true and valid, and you need to talk about how your argument is going to deal with it. And I'm trying to think of a good example for that for you. I would say, like for instance, since we've discussed this a little bit this semester, with arguing for the legalization of marijuana, one of the big opponents that argued for that and said that, they would say for years, it's a gateway drug, it's a gateway drug, it's a gateway drug. And a lot of the evidence came out and proved that, in fact, it's not a gateway drug. People are mostly going to do what they do, and that, it's cloudy because other things like cigarettes and tobacco and spinning around in circles when you're a kid, can also be evidence of gateway drug. And a lot of people who do hard drugs, never even do pot. So you have to show research and, destroy their argument. Or for another example of how to show that their argument may have a good point, one of the arguments against marijuana is that, that in mothers who are breastfeeding and smoking marijuana, it slows the rate of growth and in terms of dexterity and motor development for the children. But we found the research found, for example, that was a very temporary thing, and after kids quit breastfeeding, they went right back to normal. So you would maybe acknowledge that is one issue with legalization of marijuana is there is this one issue with breastfeeding mothers. And so, you would have to come up with a way to argue, to take that truth into consideration and to deal with it. Okay? I'm sorry for the typo here, but it helps if your research destroys your opposition's argument as well. Okay. So your last body paragraph, disproves their argument. So your last body paragraph has to be your last big, strong point of argument. And it follows that same pattern. Discuss what it is that you're trying to change, how you're proposing to do it, or what your reader should do. Give us some research that backs up your point if you need it, and explain how that research is relevant. You won't have research for every single point you make because some of them are just going to be basic logic. But you need to explain why it is basic logic, why we should change the things, why it's common sense, and to do these certain things that you're arguing for. All right, your conclusion. Your conclusion is your last chance to really hit your reader hard. This is where you want to save some kind of big emotional punch to really convince them what you're suggesting. It's the last idea you're going to leave them with. So this means you're going to have to be creative, pull out some big guns, really try to tug at the heartstrings, really try to tug at their brain in some way to get them to agree with what you're saying. Your conclusion also has to connect all your main points together by restating them, which you were told in high school, in different wording, restating them in different wording. But you also have to show that there's a relationship, a connection between all of your points. All right. Now, we're going to look at an example essay in a little bit. So, do's and don'ts. You don't use I or you in this essay. It's third person, just like we've been working on the whole semester. MLA format, 12-point font, Time New Roman. Your essay should only be 10 to 20% research quoted, not counting the works cited page. Don't let the research write the essay for you. You are convincing the reader of a point. Is your argument specific? This isn't like a abortion bad, abortion good paper. You need to come up with very specific ideas and points that you're trying to get your reader to do. Okay? Are you thinking about who your audience is and how you're convincing them? Your audience is anybody on the college campus, student or professor. Okay? So think about how you need to convince them. That means, your writing needs to be on point. You need to have good control of grammar and punctuation, and you need to know what you're talking about. You need to do some research. Read up on your topic. It'd really help if you read the novel and watched the film this semester. All right. Does your evidence back up your main points, or are you just dropping quotes in? Okay. Did you properly quote and cite your research? Do you have an introductory phrase, a tag phrase, an anchor phrase, a signal phrase? Is your works cited page correct? Do you have a clear and powerful thesis that tells us what you're arguing for and what the solution is? What you're proposing that we do. Okay, proofread. Okay. Did you just go to Google to get your research? If yes, then you need to follow all the steps to validate that research. What's the author's education, experience, publication history, work history, all that stuff. Because if you give me some bunk sources, you're going to get a bunk grade. Okay, do you know when it's due? Check, turn it in. Check your syllabus. Have you tried several ways to organize your sentences and paragraph to see what best works for the reader? Try to be efficient with your writing. Don't use 10 words when 5 will do. Right? Think about the order of the information you're giving your reader. They need to, get it in a way that makes sense. Okay? Does your conclusion end with force with a strong final note? And the biggest mistake that you can make, are you reporting or are you arguing for something? A lot of these essays end up being a report rather than an essay that's trying to convince somebody to do something. Those are two very different things and skill sets, which is very important that you watch the lecture where we look at an example of an argument essay.